Thanks for joining us here on WBCC and FloridaToday.com. I'm Matt Reed, and today we dissect the economy here on the Space Coast. Our guest is Mike Slotkin, an economist and professor at the Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne. Dr. Slotkin is an expert on trade and business policy, welfare reform and public assistance, as well as the economics of the environment. We'll get to that, I promise. Also joining us for Political Perspective is Florida Today editorial page editor John Glisch. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you to be here.
Well, one of the biggest economic news stories of the year has been the effort by Congress and the Obama administration to stimulate the economy and save jobs by spending hundreds of billions of dollars. We'll get to our guest's take on that in a minute, right after this report from our Tallahassee Bureau on how the money is trickling down into the state.
I think you have the floor.
Governor Charlie Crist met with state leaders to find out how the economic stimulus package is affecting Florida's economy. The money is mainly being used for transportation, teacher retention, and unemployment benefits.
Our last and most recent program, as you know, is our State Extended Benefits Program.
Florida's Agency for Workforce Innovation delivered more than $500 million to unemployed Floridians so far. And with unemployment at a 30-year high of 10.2%, phone calls continue flooding call centers.
We've continued to enhance our call center operations throughout the increased demand that we've experienced. In fact, in mid-August, we're going to launch, as a result of federal stimulus dollars, an overflow call center.
Florida's classrooms are also cashing in on the stimulus package. Educators say they've saved and created more than 28,000 jobs so far.
And that's really the point. You know, this is to help people, to help our education system, to help people with health care needs, and it's the people's money, so they deserve it.
Governor Charlie Crist also hopes to steer stimulus money toward high-speed rail projects. And we can't forget about the $126 million that's been allotted for green goals, things including energy-efficient appliances and solar panel incentives.
I hope that Florida continues to do well. I think that we all want unemployment to come down, and only time will tell about that.
In Tallahassee for Florida Today, I'm Brittany Benner.
Well, despite that spending, Brittany just forwarded me the information that Florida's unemployment rate has hit a 30-year high, 10.6%, which is higher than the national average of 9.5%. Mike, higher unemployment, does that mean that the stimulus is not working?
No, I don't think you can draw that conclusion at this point. Of the stimulus of the hundreds of billions of dollars you mentioned in your opening, a very small portion has actually been spent at this point in time. And it's really going up against a very strong ship moving in the wrong direction. To give you an example, those numbers that you cited previously, for Brevard County, we've basically lost 20,000 jobs in the last 3 years. And we've gotten very little stimulus money at this point in time. To see whether this is going to work, you need a much longer time period. Now, having said that, it has been my opinion that the amount of money that Obama went for in his first stimulus package, or to date the only stimulus package he's passed, was probably too small. And so they may revisit that at some point in time.
What would a bigger stimulus bill have done?
Well, CBO a few months ago was projecting the whole in aggregate demand to be something like $1.5 trillion. So if you think you've got a multiplier of about 2, you'd probably require about $700 billion of spending, which is what that bill had. The problem was they projected that hole for over 2 years. So you really probably need a stimulus package that was twice the size that it was originally passed on.
John, do you think there's actually a chance of a bigger stimulus package passing or another stimulus bill passing?
Right now, no. The administration isn't going in that direction. Either the president has not. Secretary of Treasury Geithner have said not right now. We got to give this thing time to work. As Dr. Slotkin has mentioned, only about 20% of the money has been spent so far. The big rollout really starts in October, through October of this year, through October of 2011. That's where you're going to see over $400 billion of that money go into the system, and I think you're going to start to see a much more, a bigger impact. The program was never designed to not prevent job loss. It was designed to kind of cushion the blow so that the depth of the unemployment would not be as high. The administration also, the White House has really gone on the offensive on this in recent days too, kind of calling out the hypocrisy of some of the Republican lawmakers who say, well, this already shows that it's not working and just kill the whole thing. One of the senators from Arizona did it the other day, and the administration responded by sending letters from the Secretaries of Transportation, Education, and another department to the governor, the Republican governor of Arizona, saying, if you feel this way too, just let us know and we'll stop the money. And she went and had a press conference and said, no, that's crazy. We don't believe that at all. We desperately need this because it's helping keep our state afloat. There's a big political tug of war going on right now, but there's a long way to go on this stimulus measure yet.
Mike, what are some of the pros and cons for people here in Brevard County? They have so many different hands in the economy. They're savers, they're consumers, they're small business people. What are some of the pros and cons of such a big stimulus bill being passed?
Well, the pro of stimulus is exactly what the word connotes there. You're actually trying to stimulate aggregate demand. You're trying to get injection of some spending into the economy. And that is the only way to really close this gap. The con is if the spending persists and you run a legacy of deficits through the years, that can impact long-term interest rates, which impacts long-term growth potential. The point is you have to make the decision here is that you have a very sick economy right now, as if you have a sick patient in a hospital. And you can't really worry about whether these drugs may impact your body 20 years down the line if you need them right now to survive. And right now, we need these to survive. The spending, I don't think, is great enough. I understand the politics of what John was referring to a second ago, but I think at some point the President and Congress are going to recognize that as we're starting to crouch up on 10% for this economy right here in Brevard, where you've got the specter of perhaps layoffs at the Cape next year coming up. I mean, it might not be very long in the future where we're looking at unemployment rates in the teens here.
Wow. Take a look at these numbers from the federal stimulus tracking website, recovery.com. This is where the money is gone, but keep in mind the total cost includes revenue foregone by Uncle Sam in order to keep more in the private sector. As you can see, about 1/3 of the so-called stimulus spending, $288 billion of it, will come in the form of tax cuts. Mike, we'll start with you. What is the best approach to taxes during a recession like this?
One of the problems you get into with taxes is it's wonderful for me to give you a tax cut. But if we're implementing these tax cuts in order to stimulate the economy, the direct line is, do you actually take that tax cut and spend it? If you don't, then really the tax cut didn't serve its purpose. There was actually a study that was done after the tax cut that was implemented in 2001, and about 2/3 of the tax cut had been spent. Okay, so you got 1 cent, 66 cents working for you versus on the spending side, a complete dollar would work for you.
John, is it fair to talk about tax cuts as a cost to government?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, it is in a sense, and going back to the point that Dr. Slotkin had just made, there were tax cuts given last year when President Bush was still in office, when the recession was really firmly starting to come in review. I think it was a couple $100 billion. Everybody got a rebate, $500 or $1,000, and they were hoping if they injected that, by doing that would kick all that money into the economy. It didn't do anything. As he had mentioned, what happened was
I kicked mine into the economy. What happened?
Most people saved it. Or maybe they spent it to pay down some credit card debt because they were worried about their job. It did not have, you know, the stimulative effect. And yeah, I mean, if you're cutting taxes, you're doing that, then that's less revenue that's coming into government, so it can kind of exacerbate the problem.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about real estate and construction a little bit, because that's a big issue here in Brevard County and really across the state of Florida. I saw some numbers from the Economic Development Commission that show that new construction typically accounts for about 9%, I think, of the gross domestic product here in Brevard County. How can really the collapse of one kind of sector like that really bring down an economy like ours? Do you have some perspective on that?
Well, during the bubble, it was probably higher than that. You remember, that's just the direct construction. Think about everything that's associated with a new home with respect to furniture, painting, gardening, landscaping, pool service. It's probably a much higher figure than 9%. The answer to the question is, in fact, it is. All you have to do is look at the permitting figures. The permitting figures in this county peaked in the fall of 2005. And then there's a pretty steep dive that continues on even to this day. And probably 2 quarters after that permitting started diving, employment started diving. So there's no doubt in my mind, and the data shows it, that it was the lack of construction and the decline in construction that led this recession in Brevard.
You think we've bottomed out? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
I don't want to say we've bottomed out. There are so many problems associated with the real estate industry right now. Some of it is a vicious cycle that occurs because of falling prices, and because of falling prices you may get more people induced to walk away from their homes. So you have this excess, you have excess inventory of homes, and you don't have any population growth right now.
John, there's something that looks like it's going to be on the ballot next November called the Hometown Democracy, potentially a constitutional amendment.
It is on the ballot.
It is on the
It is
ballot.
on the
Okay,
ballot.
well, you want to explain that, and what do you think? How do you think that could affect growth and development in Florida?
It's a reaction. What we're dealing here with two sides of an issue where they're both extreme approaches, and in all extreme approaches, they're bad approaches, and they equate to horrible public policy that could really hurt the state. Hometown democracy really kicked up originally in about 2006 because of the rampant development in Florida. People were feeling there was too much going on. Taxpayers were getting stuck with too much of the bill for the development and the money that the developers were making. So they wanted to get this initiative on the ballot that would require a public vote on the ballot for any city or county change to their comprehensive plans. That portends just enormous bureaucratic tie-ups, potentially expensive constant elections that could really cripple the development and housing industry in Florida just when they need to try to get it back going. That is a reaction, though, and where they may get support for this is in the legislative session that just ended a couple months ago. The legislature, at the behest of the development lobby, totally gutted 25 to 30 years of growth management laws in Florida, including requirements that had developers pay their fair share of growth, specifically for roads. It's a disastrous piece of legislation, because all those costs then eventually are going to wind up coming down onto the backs of local taxpayers in Brevard County and in Brevard cities and other places around Florida. So you've got these two disastrous pieces of public policy hanging out there that are going to collide. I mean, the smart thing to do and the common sense thing to do and the logical thing to do is the thing that isn't done, which is you bring the stakeholders together. You get the developers together with the smart growth advocates, the environmentalists, and the state regulators and state lawmakers, and you say, okay, what can we do to make some reasonable and perhaps necessary changes in these laws to streamline some things, make them more efficient, while still maintaining safeguards and making sure taxpayers don't get stuck holding the bag. That's not what we're seeing, so what you're going to just see is a head-on clash next year. I wouldn't be surprised to see that ballot initiative pass.
Wow, okay. Well, it sounds like we might have a perfect storm coming, because now, okay, let's talk about the Space Center and the jobs out there. I think the new estimates show potentially 6,000 to 7,000 jobs being lost out there. Mike, how does that factor into Brevard County's recovery and the time that might take?
Well, it would certainly delay it for several years. I mean, if you're talking about 20,000 job losses to date, and you're adding another 6,000 to 7,000, each one of those jobs will have some multiplier to it because it supports other jobs. It's principally located up in the northern end of the county. I would imagine many of those people that lose their jobs are primary breadwinners. A good portion of those are going to be homeowners, which means they want to flee the area and drop their home. So you could probably be looking at trouble here all the way to the midpoint of the decade if that happens. Hopefully, this will propel or provide impetus for some further action by Obama. We'll see.
John, is there anything really that policymakers can do or might do to significantly offset some of the losses that we're talking about here?
Yes, the question is, what do they in fact do? Last year, then candidate Obama came here to Brevard County, to Titusville, in the shadow of the Space Center, and promised that the United States was going to he was going to fully support the post-shuttle Constellation program and return astronauts to the moon. Now he's gone back and he's appointed a Blue Ribbon panel, which will be issuing a report in late August saying if we should really do that. What should we really do because of the costs involved? So right now all this is up in the air. I tend to think that one thing to remember, though, is that there is a big political equation that is going to be factored into, I think, to the White House's eventual decision on this. And it's that Obama won Florida. It helped propel him into the White House. It's a crucial state. I don't know if he would stiff Florida and stiff this whole Central Florida region, which provided him with a lot of votes, by just completely backing away from a post-shuttle world and a moon project, or at least something equally substantial. So that is going to be part of what we're going to be seeing coming down here in the next few months through the fall. Which way does it fall out?
Okay, so whatever they decide, that's going to affect. I'm sorry, Mike.
I was going to add, you also have a Democratic senator up for re-election in 2012 too, so I'm sure he probably doesn't want to leave him hanging on this issue.
And Nelson, of course, was a big proponent of, a big supporter of then Senator Obama, and worked to help him win Florida and get votes here in this region because of the space program. So.
Well, another big spending bill in Congress, one that could affect us all right here on the Space Coast, would invest in developing clean energy technology. It also would start a cap-and-trade system to limit pollution. Will it help? Well, the latest figures I found from 2007 showed that Florida already is home to more than 31,000 clean energy jobs, and more than $117 million in venture capital has been invested over the past 3 years. In June, Mike, you gave Florida Today a mixed message on clean energy employment and its ability to make up for other job losses, but you said, quote, in the long term, if you believe climate change is a legitimate issue, then these jobs are the wave of the future. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. What I tried to explain to the reporter is that anybody that suggests that a clean energy bill is going to make up for the 20,000 jobs that have been lost in Brevard County as a short-term stimulus correction, that's not going to happen. We're talking long-term over the next couple of decades. And I do believe it's the wave of the future. I do think this is promising for the area. I think the biggest thing that mitigates against this is the price of gasoline. When gasoline is priced at $4 a gallon, it's a whole lot easier to get alternative energy programs going. When gasoline is down at $2 or less, it's very difficult. So proper policy towards pricing carbon, which is what the cap and trade would do, would actually promote more alternative energy development.
I'm glad to have an economist in the room because there's been so much talk about this cap and trade portion of it, how it's going to be a big tax on consumers and the like. What is your take on cap and trade? Can it work economically, and will it do more good than harm, or vice versa?
Well, cap and trade's already worked. It's what we use in the sulfur dioxide trading program, the acid rain problem.
Okay.
Effectively, what was done in that program is permits were allocated to the existing polluters based on their historical weighted average of what they emitted back, I think, in 1988, with the idea of getting those issued permits down to a level where you'd be at, I think, half the level that we were in 1980 by the year 2000, and it worked. Okay, and no excessive unemployment in the areas of the Midwest that you see this. Okay, we did issue the permits for free. There is talk about auctioning the permits where the government would actually get some proceeds. That's yet to be determined, I think.
John, Mike just mentioned that it worked. What happens if the critics of cap and trade and of this clean energy bill, such as Bill Posey, a Republican from Rockledge, what if it works? Does it backfire on Republicans, or do we all just go on and are we just glad for the clean air?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're not even sure how this is going to play out. It did make it through the House just a couple of weeks ago. It still has to go through the Senate, where it could be kind of emasculated yet. We'll see. There's a lot of very powerful forces at work. Of course, the different special interest lobbies get involved, the energy industry, the oil industry, and they can really whittle these things down. I think more to the point of cost, when you take out some of the just really completely distorted high-end numbers that were being thrown around by opponents of it, that it could cost the family as much as $1,300 a year more in energy bills, that's all been debunked. The best estimates through I think like the Congressional Budget Office and some other studies indicated the actual cost will maybe between $60 and $170 more per family by about 2020, although those costs could very well be even quite a bit less than that because of rebates and other energy savings. So it falls into an affordable energy, especially when you look at it as maybe a dime a day per person in a family of four for those kind of numbers. So I mean, it could work a long time. Another key question to ask on this issue is the scientific consensus is overwhelming and unequivocal that climate change is real, it's accelerating, and it's man-made. If you don't do this bill, what do you do? If not this, when? If not this, what? And if not now, when? And a big problem I think that the opponents have of this is they don't have answers to any of those questions. It's just no without any real significant alternative.
Yeah, let me just add the tranchement, the whittling down of how much you're emitting occurs over such a period of time that this will go beyond, unless he lives to be an incredibly old man, Bill Posey.
Is that-
Okay, yes. I mean, you're talking about getting these numbers down by probably the midpoint of the century. I seriously doubt Bill Posey's still going to be in Congress at that point in time.
All right, well, thank you for your comments today. Appreciate that very much. Well, that's our program. My thanks to Dr. Michael Slotkin of the Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne, and to my colleague, John Glisch. I'm Matt Reed. We'll see you right here next Wednesday on WBCC and FloridaToday.com. Thanks for joining us.